All right, welcome in everyone. Welcome in. I'm joined by Randall. So Randall is the CISO of Income Research and Management. And welcome in everyone. Say hello to Randall. Randall, welcome in. Welcome in.
Hi there.
All right. So Randall, I read your bio and you're a man of many hats. Whether that's
Uh,
a CISO. Yep, go
I
ahead.
yeah, yeah, that's an accurate and fair statement. I do wear a lot of hats. Yeah, and have worn many other hats at various times throughout my career. Yeah.
Awesome. So tell us how you got to where you are today.
Well, it's a pretty improbable journey. And it's a fairly long one. I'll try to be concise, but I was a graphic designer um,
Mhm.
way back when. So late 80s, early 90s, I was a graphic designer. So that whole desktop publishing revolution happened, you know, in the early years of my career. So in those days it was Macintoshes. Um, and initially, one or two, very quickly they multiply. And then you need to share files. And so servers come along and storage and all of this stuff. Um, I found myself spending less and less time designing food labels and such, and more time fixing the technology that enabled folks on my team to do their jobs, right? And so I was sitting at my Mac less, and I was using the Windows machines for the business aspect, whether that be the accounting system or workflow, what have you, more and more and more. And so I was like, well, I seem to have an aptitude for this. And the folks who report to me, they're handling the graphics workload just fine. Um, and so I'll probably focus on this. So it was very kind of accidental. Um,
Hmm.
and so, um, and what that looked like initially, as I said, there were Macintoshes at first, and then there were Apple servers, and not casting any aspersions, but they weren't very good, right? They crashed a lot. So I was NetWare first, and then NT came along, um, and then Windows 2000, Active Directory. The internet starts becoming a thing. Everybody needs email. So yeah, so I just was spending more and more time enabling folks to work with technology and the current feeding of all of that. So along that way, you know, certifications and learning the ins and outs of networking and cybersecurity came much later. But so I left the publishing industry um very early 2000s,
Mhm.
um, and started working at my first MSP. And in those days, we didn't call them MSPs. They were technology consultants, and remote support and things like that didn't exist yet. So, what would happen is your clients would buy blocks of your time, right? So you'd get in a car and you'd drive to their location, and you'd help them with their technical problems for part of the time, and then the other part of that time would be strategic. What business challenge or problem
Mhm.
do you have that might be able to be fixed or solved or improved with technology? And you know what tends to happen is when you do these things, then that sparks other ideas of
Yeah.
things that folks hadn't even thought of. Oh, with this technology, we may be able to do X or Y. So spent more of my time doing that. So um, and as well as working on a help desk, because we really all kind of did that in those days where you would answer people's calls. And we didn't have remote agents into their machines yet in those days. So you're trying, describe to me what you're seeing and, that kind of thing. And over time, RMM tools, ticketing systems, and these things came along. Um, and so I very quickly went from being an engineer to, you know, supervising teams of engineers. And then as I moved along, um, so this would probably be about 2005-ish, I guess.
Mhm.
I joined an organization that was MicroData. I came on as a senior engineer, but very quickly uh, was promoted initially as director of engineering and then became a vice president. Um, and so I went from helping end users to running teams of technical people, right? So, in one bucket, so to speak, you've got
Mhm.
help desk folks and reactive support. And then you've got engineers, whether that be, you know, uh, network or systems engineering and what have you. And then you've got the strategic component. So kind of fractional uh, CIO, CISO, although that was just in its infancy at that point. So where you're, again, folks are buying bits of your time for you to help them strategically with their technology initiatives. Um, I moved on. And I was at that organization for almost 14 years, right?
Mhm.
Um, so latter half of the 20 teens, I guess, I moved on, and then I was a COO of yet another MSP slash MSSP, and for the uninitiated, MSP is managed service provider, and MSSP is managed security services provider. Um, so then, we were at this next organization that I ran, and this was the entire organization that I ran at that point. So um, that's, not only are we helping them with their IT problems, but we're also running cybersecurity for them. So I spent close to 25 years in that service provider realm. And then right around the pandemic, I joined IRM, my current role. And so they hired me as a CISO. Um, so initially as a CISO, and during my tenure, I wound up taking on infrastructure and the support mechanism as well. So my team encompasses cybersecurity, infrastructure, so network engineering, systems administration, that kind of thing. And then the help desk and all the end user support, they all report to me as well. Um, so yeah, to kind of full circle and wrap that whole journey up, started as a graphic designer, became an IT person, and then drifted into becoming a technology and cybersecurity executive.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
there's so many interesting things that you mentioned, and I think a lot of our audience will be curious because you went from helping individuals and helping clients to transitioning into leading a team.
right.
And so within that transition period, what were some of the challenges that you encountered
Oh,
within, yeah.
so it's a well, there's quite a few, right? And they fit into different categories, I guess. There are definitely technical challenges. The technology, honestly, wasn't very good in those days. It was very unreliable. It was buggy. Um, it's matured a lot, right? And over the decades since those days. So there were technological challenges. There were many, right? There were a lot of it was education. Technology. Younger folks, I think, have had that technology most, if not all of their lives, meaning they may have had it in school They had it in their formative years. So a lot of that I think has been taken for granted, but
Mm,
I've had the benefit and maybe the burden, if you will, of kind of being along that curve where, um, we didn't have cell phones yet. And now imagine a life where you don't have one of these things with you all the time, right? We didn't even have them yet. And now, there's much more computing power in this thing than any server we had in those days, if you can imagine that. Um, so I'm trying to give you an answer without a non-answer. Um, so educating people about how this technology works, in other words, it's a tool for enablement. Don't be afraid of it. Um, so there were definitely those challenges. Um, Technical people are a little different to manage than, say, um, administration staff or analysts or general office workers, operations, because they tend to be a little more introverted. They
mm,
tend to be um, they tend to work better alone, at least for part of the time. So you have to work on getting folks to come out of their shells and be a little more open and collaborative. That can be challenging. So there's definitely, you're a mentor at times, you're a little bit of a psychologist at times.
yeah.
You may have to be kind of a quasi parent or big brother at times. So there's technical skills, there's management skills, and there's people skills or soft skills. Um, and I've had to work on all of those. It's because it's not just like, um, they're not all innate, right? So
Mm,
kind of recognizing where I might have needed to focus more of my energies to perhaps get better at certain things. And I kind of had to learn a lot of those things on the fly. So I don't really have any formal management uh training or even technical training. I everything that I know about technology, cybersecurity, management, all my business acumen, those are all of the I learned all of that in the trenches in real time.
wow. I speak to quite a number of leaders every day, and there are certain times where they say some things where it appears, well, that's normal. And I'm like, no, no, that's not normal. Because I know that there are people who don't have courage, right, to be able to step into roles that you have stepped into. So, what would you say to someone who's listening right now, who's contemplating, okay, I want to step into senior leadership, but I don't have the coach energy. I don't have the big brother energy. I don't have the psychologist. I don't have the technical background. What would you say to them?
So if you recognize I'm really good at this technical stuff, or I have more of a scientific mind, I'm really good at problem solving. Um, but I definitely, if you make that decision or you have that inkling or you think, all right, I want to be a team lead or manage a manager, and you recognize that you're lacking there, then read everything you can on the topic, research, you practice it,
Mm,
in a safe environment. Um, but if you're waiting to acquire X amount of years of experience, no one's just going to hand you that, say, okay, you've never done this before, and here's a chunk of that experience, right? That's not going to
mm,
work that way. So if you don't have a natural talent for that, but you've made the decision, I want to do that. Well, then you're just going to have to research it, read about it, learn about it, and then just start doing it, right? That can be tough to do in really structured, maybe larger corporate environments, because you may not be given um, some of those decision rights or the ability to do that. I, you know, there's pluses and minuses, I think, to any situation, right? I spent a lot of my time in SMB, smaller
Mhm.
organizations. Um, and then, I work in, we're not, my current role, we're not a huge, we're not a, Fortune 100 or 500, anything like that, but it's a much larger, more structured organization than some of the smaller organizations I've worked in. So in the smaller organizations, I took a lot of risks, right?
Mm.
Um, and, you know, reckless risk, I don't recommend that to anyone. Um, but if you don't take any risks, there's no growth either, right? I think we all always say comfort zones are beautiful places, but nothing grows there either, right? So if you want to grow, if you want to expand, if you want to advance, it's not always going to be comfortable. So embrace some of that anxiety, I think. You can use that as fuel.
I really appreciate you saying that because I feel like oftentimes when we step into something new and we have that anxiety, we think it's meant to stop us. And so
Yes.
what you're saying is embrace it, normalize it, and act.
Yeah. I mean, so we have our innate fight or flight reactions to things, like to actual danger, like, okay, I don't want to step out into onto the freeway. There are cars, right? That's smart, right?
Mhm.
Um, but so I don't mean it in that regard. If something's blatantly dangerous, or just this is a really bad idea for one's career or personal growth or what have you, yeah, examine that a bit, right?
Mhm.
I'm meaning more, this is completely new to me and I feel some anxiety about it. Um, if your first reaction is, oh no, I just don't want to go there. What I'm saying is challenge that, right? Because it's very easy to just go, this is uncomfortable, so therefore I'm not going to dip my toe in that water. I would say that's what you need to wrestle with a bit, because if that always if your reaction to no, I'm not going to go there, if that always wins, then you know the risk, I think, there is regret, right? I wished I had done that, whatever that is, right? So and you're not always going to win, you're not always going to make the right choice, right? There are going to be times when you take those risks that, it may not always pay off, but if you don't take any risk in that regard, you're guaranteed there won't be a payoff.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Wise words, Randall. Wise words. Because what I'm hearing now is it's not just about taking risks, but doing it from a place of discernment, where
Yeah.
it's wise and smart. And at the same time, remembering that if you don't take the aligned action, no reward, no growth.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I so if we unpeel, if we peel or roll back, you know, career, life's lessons, all of these things. I used to be a very shy, introverted
Mhm.
person. So I guess that's that. So if we think about, okay, what raw materials are we starting with? That's that's where I was, right? I had to learn, practice, come out of my shell, so to speak. Um, so if we're gonna rely on just, well, this is what comes naturally to me, or this is who or what I am, you're definitely going to have to challenge that. Because now some people are total type A's, they're on 12 all the time, and sometimes they have to learn patience and moderation. So we definitely have our natural, like, extreme introverts and maybe extreme extroverts, right? And so I was the extreme introvert, and I had to learn to come out of my shell. So this was all practiced, learned behavior for me. It wasn't natural at all. But I saw, okay, folks who are assertive and they speak up and they volunteer for things and what have you. Um, that might look scary or risky, and maybe they don't have as much free time for their hobbies or whatever. Um, but my observation was those folks were they were getting promoted, they were getting more of the things that they might want. And so that's an observation I made. And so I had to get over my natural shyness and hesitance and what have you. And it is like anything else, whether it's practicing a musical instrument or whatever, you do need to practice it.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning the fact that you are deeply introverted and you had to get out of your shell because there are people that I talk to, and even myself too. It's a different kind of pressure that comes when it's not your natural
Yeah,
personality, and there are
yeah,
extra things that you have to do. And I want to just kind of go a little bit deeper into that. So,
sure.
from your perspective, right, for introverted people in general, people that want to be leaders, what are some of the almost kind of the challenges that they might encounter once they decide to step into a role of leadership? And how did you overcome that?
Um, I guess I can give example, right? So whether it be, you're looking for a promotion, or if you're moving from one organization to another, um we've got a couple of tools, right? We've got our resumes, and we've got kind of the interview process. um in some ways it might be easier in a job change than maybe it might be in a promotion. And here's why I say that, because let's say you're an individual contributor or part of a particular team, your staff, right? And now you want to become team lead or management. Um, it might be harder if you're kind of becoming a newer or improved or broadened version of yourself. Um, you may feel differently. um but one challenge I can see is perhaps, okay, Friday, I was this individual contributor or what have you, and now I've become the team lead. And I feel good about this situation, and management feels good about this situation, but maybe my peers or my colleagues, they're still thinking of me as the old Randall, right? So I think there's a challenge of getting um getting your coworkers or those around you to participate in that process. And so there might be a proving of yourself, and convincing others, yeah, I'm ready for this. Let me show you, these new skills or tools that I've acquired or learned, right? um, I could see where that may be challenging. um, so that might be easier in some respects if one is moving on to another organization. That's not to say that I'm telling you it can't be done, or oh, if you want to uh if you want to become a leader, the only way to do that is at another organization. I'm not necessarily saying that, but it might be easier to close that door and open another one. That's one aspect. So I think one potential challenge might be, if you're getting a promotion at your existing organization, there might be, not only for yourself, but for either your new team or new set of coworkers, um, as well as your current team or your old team. There might be everyone kind of might need to get used to this new and improved you, right? So um, because you can only control what you do. You can't
Mhm.
control how others might react, but you do need them to participate in that process, right? um so I could see where that could be a challenge, right? um but you can really only do your part, right? So you know, you have to do, if your job description was say this long and now now you're in leadership and it's tripled in length, well, you have to check all those boxes. You have to do your part. Um, but you have to, I, or I would say, don't be shocked if you've got some, I don't want to say doubters, but there
Mhm.
may be some skepticism on people's part, whether that's fair or not. But I would say you know, you're going to have to encourage those folks to, you know, they may, you know, there may be some show me, don't tell me aspect to it,
Mhm.
right? So be prepared for that, and don't let, don't let that discourage you. I mean, I can give you an example. Um, I, you know, when I joined MicroData, I had to prove myself more in, you know, initially, so I had to kind of write, um I wouldn't call it a thesis, right? It was more of an essay, but there was trepidation about where some of the folks I was competing with for that position had maybe more impressive education credentials than I did. Whereas I had a lot more real world experience, um, which, in my opinion, I would argue that's much more important than education. Not to say that education isn't important, but there's a lot of theory, you know, and lectures, and you're hearing about what others have done, and there's definitely value in that. But my journey was, I was in the trenches and I did X, Y, and Z. But so I had to kind of summarize, you know, here's why my experience doing these things is actually going to be more valuable to your organization, and how I'll be more successful in this role, in my view, than these folks who've had, you know, years of these impressive schools learning, reading, hearing about these things. But I've done these things. Um, so that that was one challenge that I personally had, was that there was skepticism. And so um, I guess I made a convincing argument. And then, of course, if you ever say that you can do something or you will do something, you have to deliver, right? So be ready for that. Um, and don't be afraid. Let's say there's a job you want, or a position you want, a promotion. If there's a list of criteria, boxes to check, if you don't check every single one of those, that's not an automatic disqualifier. In other words, um, you know, oh, I don't, you know, I didn't, you know, I don't have my PhD, but I have my master's, or I don't have my master's, but I have a 4-year degree, or even if I don't have a 4-year degree. Um, that's not to say, you know, don't don't apply for a position as a neurosurgeon if you didn't go to med school. But what I'm saying is that if you don't check all the boxes, don't let that be a deterrent. Because if you have experience, but you maybe don't have the paper credentials, don't they let don't they let don't let that be a deterrent. I've never let that stop me. I would always, you know, once I acquired and practiced those skills, and of coming out of my shell, not being so introverted, and there's muscle memory there. It doesn't come overnight. You have to keep doing it, and then it does become natural. So if it's not innate, if it's, you don't feel like it's in your DNA, oh, I wasn't born with this, I wasn't like this as a kid, whatever that might be. If you want to acquire a new skill, or you want to be a more assertive, or more um, open or gregarious or extroverted person, you can become that if it's important enough to you, and you do need to practice it. And the more you do it, the more it comes naturally, and you don't have to think about it. And when the time comes and you go into that meeting, you'll find that switch just turns on.
Wow. There's so many key aspects that you've just brought in, right? Normalizing that, okay, this is new, but don't let that stop you.
Right.
Again, using discernment, a nurse not applying to be a doctor and vice versa, but at the
Right.
same time, not waiting, not waiting till you're there 100%
Yeah.
to be able to take that up. And there's something that I want to get your perspective on, because you talked about when you stepped into one of your roles, you felt the need to prove yourself because
Mhm.
of the skepticism that came with that.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've been hearing about InfoSec and being a CISO is having to prove or justify your presence, so you and your teams, because security is expensive. So
Right.
how do you handle that on an enterprise level?
It's a great question. Um, so I'm in the financial services sector. So some of that is self-evident, right? So I don't want to say I have a benefit there because it has its challenges, believe me. But um, the reason I bring that up is because it's more evident that InfoSec isn't an option or a luxury in the financial sector. It's an absolute necessity, right? So I guess I have that benefit. Um, other sectors, um, rewind even 2 years ago, maybe it wasn't so obvious, and it was probably viewed as this is a cost center, it's a luxury. A lot of this is theoretical. I I would think today, right now, where we were June 2025, if the need for cybersecurity is not painfully obvious to everyone in business, whatever that business may be, then I would encourage you to have another cup of coffee. Because, you know, it's it's in the news, it's all over social media, which is where I think what most folks are getting their news, or just what's going on, right? More so than traditional media at this point. There's there's news of breaches every single day, right? Um, so, but challenges. So when I look back on my own journey and transitioning less from more traditional IT into cybersecurity, um, I know how to build environments really well, and therefore I know how to harden them. Um, so I think in that aspect, it's a little bit perhaps easier for me to justify my own existence, as you put it. Um, and I know there are, I'm not alone in that regard. There are a lot of CISOs who were CIOs, CTOs, or, somewhere in their career, they were network administrators or firewall admins, or maybe they were SOC analysts, systems engineers. That my philosophy, and I'm sure will people challenge it, and that's perfectly fine. If you know how to build it, then you know how to harden it too, right? Um, but I think the challenge of InfoSec justifying its own existence, I think that's less difficult today than it was even a year ago, just because of there are so many breaches that are happening in so many ways, whether it be, you know, still probably the biggest attack surface is I would argue still phishing attacks, right? But um, you know, uh deep fakes, AI is being used with great success, unfortunately, to craft these, great or convincing phishing emails, or, we hear the stories of deep fake Zoom calls and what have you. So, uh, you know, glamorizing or sensationalizing some of these stories uh, isn't a great thing, but hopefully it has raised most folks' awareness as to how important cybersecurity in general is, um, and hopefully um, awareness training for their end users, because it's a team sport, so to speak. It's not okay, here's our security person or our security team, and they're going to take care of us, and we can just continue on our merry way. Um, well, that's not true, because we've all got devices, whether they be phones, tablets, laptops, PCs, what have you, um, to do our jobs, right? I
Mhm.
think very few people, yeah, I mean, if you're out running gas lines in the street, if you're welding or digging those holes with machinery, you're probably not directly interacting with technology, but someone in that crew probably is, right? So it's hard to imagine anyone in their day, whatever that may be, their workday, there's some interaction with technology, right? So, and there, so, everyone sitting at their desk has email and what have you. And so that's an attack surface. So,
Mhm.
so there's the big picture, the back end stuff that needs to be done to protect that, but the end users are still vulnerable. So so as I get back to that, cyber is a team sport. So therefore we have to teach best practices to everyone, do this, don't do that. Um, the bigger picture stuff, how, what machine learning is used in whatever email gateway, that's not for the average end user to worry about, but certainly, you know, uh, how hover over links, don't just click and, reports anything that even smells fishy, so to speak, right? Those kinds of things, those cyber skills, those are just general business skills now, or they should be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh, were you about to say something?
no, I was gonna say if they're not, maybe reach out, reach out to the cyber team in your organization and say, hey, we're not getting training, I think we should.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there are a couple of things that, as you were speaking, I was just kind of taking a mental note here. Um, because I agree with you that we are in a place today where it's no longer a perk to have cybersecurity, it's a necessity.
Agreed.
And I want to pull the curtain back because we've had the opportunity to interview practitioners. I'm also a practitioner myself. And there's this incessant, because the threats don't stop, but
Right.
the humans have to take a break and
Yeah.
come back the next day. How do you handle the human resilience aspects? There's a lot of talk about cyber resilience, but from a
Yeah.
human perspective for yourself and for your team,
Yeah.
how do you handle that?
So I mean, I guess I can, I'm gonna have to draw on my own, this is my situation or my team situation, right? And so it's not one size fits all, but so, you know, we've my team, we do have we it's not we're not in it alone, and here's what I mean. So we do have the benefit of having an MDR provider, right? So um you know having a resource like a really good MDR provider, excuse me, they're 24/7, 365, right? So they've got multiple shifts, they've got eyes on screens all the time, so that myself and my team, we don't literally need to be awake 24/7, right? So we have a partner in that regard. So that we can take our days off, we can take our
Mhm.
vacations, our PTO, and you need to do those things. Um, burnout in any job is a real thing. Burnout in IT in general, as I would say, is that with feet on the accelerator, right? And burnout in cybersecurity is IT burnout on, with gas on that fire, I would argue, right? Because
Right.
alert fatigue and um threat intelligence fatigue. So um you you know you've got to sit down with your team and discuss, okay, we're going to do um we're going to do X amount of threat intelligence, X amount of hours per week. We're going to do vulnerability management X amount of hours per week. Research, you got to compartmentalize it. You've got to diversify it, because if you think you're going to spend 8 hours a day, just every day, looking at your vulnerability management tool, or staring at alerts all day, and you're going to burn out quickly. So um and so not only are you going to burn out, you're going to burn your people out as well. They're going to move on and find something that's more harmonious, I guess. So try to diversify what all of, if you segment it out into a pie chart, what have you, right? It can't just be one color, right? So you've got to break that up to make everyone's day, week, month more palatable, digestible, more interesting. And there's also a cross training aspect that's automatically built in if you do that, right? Um, so that when someone's on vacation, okay, Mary's on vacation and John's gonna be, kind of backing her up for the week.
Mhm.
So by I think diversifying, compartmentalizing, taking smaller bites, right? And having folks share that wealth. I it Like I said, that cross training aspect is there. It fights burnout, alert fatigue, which is a real thing, especially in cybersecurity. And it keeps people, we all have our talents, right? You're going to have people, oh, I want to be, I'm more of a red teamer, I'm more of a blue teamer. Then there's this whole concept of purple teaming. That's a whole
Yeah.
other podcast, probably in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
But I would definitely encourage, share the wealth as far as what your members of your cyber team are doing, rather than um, you know keeping it all to oneself, because you're guaranteeing your burn. If you're doing vulnerability management 40 hours a week, you're gonna be toast soon.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but this conversation is I think one of the best parts about having conversation like this is because oftentimes we hear um, practitioners saying they don't think senior leadership is even in the loop of what's going on when it comes to human resilience.
Yeah,
Many of them think that they're so far disconnected at the top that they don't see the pressure that they have to deal with every day
yeah,
just to continue to stay productive and have
right.
high performance. So hearing you say that, I think
Yeah.
it's bringing that light to something that a lot of people, a lot of practitioners have been talking about behind the scene, but it's actually running the boat for us.
Yeah, I mean, so what senior management or the board even is going to get is they're going to get your executive summary, right? They're going to get your metrics, right? Meaning your cyber metrics, right? Here's, email metrics, end user training metrics, patch management, all of that stuff. They're mostly going to see those whatever your deliverable is, whether it's a Power BI dashboard or whether it's it's a slide deck. It's usually a slide deck, right? Those mostly are going to contain metrics, to your point, right? And I don't see that changing, but if you have the ability to talk to whatever your reporting line looks like, right? So if you're a CISO, maybe you report to the CEO, probably not. Maybe you report to the COO, maybe you report to the CIO, probably, or maybe, depending on what that reporting line looks like. Hopefully you've got dialogue where maybe you can't go to the board and say, we're really burnt out, but hopefully you have a relationship or the dialogue with whom you report to, where you can say, um, my team's been, this has been a rough week. It's been a rough month, what have you, rough quarter. Hopefully it's not a rough quarter, right? Hopefully
Mm.
things ebb and flow. Um, but hopefully you've got a relationship with with your manager where you can be honest and say, it's been rough, or here's these difficult situations, because that's how you can work on, okay, how do we fix this, or how do we make this situation better? Maybe that's, hopefully it's not another tool, right? Because
Mhm.
there's so many cyber tools. I'm not to say that we don't need them, we do, but again, another like hours long conversation you probably have is all of these tools that we have available to us in cybersecurity. So hopefully that solution isn't necessarily another tool, but maybe it is. But what is causing this pressure, angst, what have you, right?
Mhm.
And let's see if we can find a solution. I don't know. Cybersecurity isn't, I don't know. That target's always moving, right? So I don't know if I don't know if we're solving, we're improving, we're managing, because yeah, we might plug this hole, right? But it's the bad guys, they're always looking for something else to exploit. So it's, how do we improve, or how do we make this better, right? And so maybe that's, someone just needs Friday afternoon off, or um you know there isn't one answer there, but um you got to talk about it. There's got to be a way to find something that's going to make that situation better. And um don't take it personally if the board doesn't feel, quote unquote, feel your pain. But if your senior manager has some idea of what your world looks like, they don't need to know, you know, in significant detail, but if they can empathize, yeah, that's got to be a challenge for you. And, you know, um, let's try to make this situation better for you, or your team, or someone who's on your team, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
These things, they do change, they move around, right?
Uh,
This SOC analyst is feeling, they're having a rough go of it, or whatever that is, right? But yeah, I mean, I the way up on high, their connection to you probably is mostly through metrics, right?
mhm.
Just
Mhm.
how are we doing from a cyber perspective, right? And please keep it brief, right? So quantify that. Okay, here's an executive summary. It's 2 pages of metrics.
Absolutely, absolutely. You put it spot on. It's the truth. And I was having a conversation with someone who has a military background. And they said in the military, because of the way things work, they have what we call resilience. They say they have like quarter resilience just to beef up, their soldiers on how to be able to handle the day-to-day of being in the military. And they were saying that they're confused why we don't have that in cyber.
Mm.
because we're doing similar. I mean, of course, not on the same level, but what we're doing every day is monitoring and making sure that we're preventing threats. And
Right.
it made me puzzled. And I was going to ask you, do you think this is something that um, if we had better training within cybersecurity as a whole, or not just the technical, but you talked about psychology, the
Yeah.
psychological aspect of dealing with that. Do you think
Yeah.
this is something that will be beneficial? Uh,
Oh, without a doubt, right? Because we have our frameworks, whatever, whether it be NIST or, pick your framework, right? Those are technical controls, and we have to have those in cyber for very good reason. But um most of the emphasis is on those technical controls, right? Here, this is an incident response plan. This is what your business continuity plan looks like. MITRE attack framework, right? We have all these technical frameworks, and they're very valuable, right? But I do think that isn't the whole story. I do think we absolutely need to incorporate more. I don't know whether it be crisis management training or the psychological aspect of it. I do tell when I have young people joining, I tell them this job isn't for everyone, right? It's going to be really stressful. So you need to know this right out of the gate. And so, and I'll, you know, myself and your colleagues on your team, we're going to work with you to try to make it as least stressful as possible. But right out of the gate, you got to know this job, this industry, it's really stressful. So so ask yourself that question. Does that sound like, if someone's telling me right from Jump Street, this is a stressful job, does that just, oh hell no, that's just, um is that going to scare me off? Well, no. If not, okay then. um yeah, I definitely, so in schools and in continuing education, and I definitely think that there needs to be more of these discussions. Now, I'm on the are you familiar with Secure World?
Secure world, no.
Secure World. Secure World it's a industry conference, and so so I'm on the advisory council of Secure World. So think of it like RSAC and um, conferences like this.
Mhm.
This year there were a lot more talks from CISOs, whether they be from, say, again, Fortune 500. We had some folks who are still active military. There were a lot more workshops and keynotes on the burnout slash psychological impact, human element of cyber, right? There were definitely discussions about EDR, XDR, AI, you know, as you can imagine, that there was a lot of that, but there was so much more human element discussions this year than previously. That's encouraging. Um, I think we need more of that. And it's hard to quantify, okay, what percentage needs to be technical and what percentage needs to be human. I don't know. I think that's going to keep moving around.
Mhm.
Um, but we definitely need to incorporate it. And I would encourage those in higher ed who have cyber programs. They need, if they haven't already done this, they need to start incorporating this stuff into their curriculum, because um I know I wasn't ready for it, because nobody told me. um so yeah, it's there's no doubt that we need to get this aspect into, like, start it in school, or if people are boot camping, or however you're learning about cyber. I'm interested in cybersecurity, so therefore, I'm going to do this, whatever, whether it's, computer-based training, or whether you're going to, an Ivy League school to learn about it. It's got to be in that stack, I think, right away.
Wow. This is so exciting. Like this is so exciting because this is something that has been on the back burner for years. And I'm
Yes.
so happy that you talk about it being talked about now, especially in that conference, Secure World, right? So
Yeah.
this is exciting. Randall, we can go on and keep talking. We're just coming into the hour here. But I had just one more last question that I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you before we round things up here. If you had a magic wand that would fix one specific problem that we're having in cyber, what would that be?
Oh, wow. So I got to pick one.
One.
So, um, if I could just snap my fingers, um, and everyone, I'm not just talking management, and I'm not talking, if we collectively could just get it, meaning, um, um, if meaning that cyber skills are they should be as fundamental as learning to read or write or ride a bicycle or whatever it may be, right? We have X amount of things that are just, if we're going to grow up, become adults, and go out into the workforce, right? We need to be able to communicate, cyber skills, because of the world we live in, and technology is not going away, right? It's only, we're on the, we're on the, we're in this AI explosion that's happening around us, right? Which guarantees we're going to be immersed in technology, period, right? So if I had that magic wand, it would just be, because it's not for me, and I think you would agree, it's not an opinion thing, it's not a point of view, it's not a frame of reference. It's, there are just some basic cyber skills, even if it's just grasping that general concept, right? That everyone really just needs to get, and not be annoyed by it and find it, just like, oh, I got to do my videos, or, my participate in my fish test or whatever. Cause,
Mhm.
you know, um, folks can have attitudes about that. Although
Yeah.
I don't know about you, I'm seeing that starting to shift, and I'm really encouraged by that. But, if I could just make folks get it, there's just some basic cyber skills that we all need to have. And if we have them, then it actually shrinks the attack surface. And they don't even need to be thinking about shrinking the attack surface. It's common sense. If we get it, um, and just becomes part of those basic skills in order to be someone who's employable, right? Then, um, so that would be my cyber. I guess that'd be number one on my cyber magic wand. There are others, but they're more conditional or targeted, I guess.
Okay. Okay. So basically, the wish is for everyone to have a basic cyber skill to pretty much make the lives of cyber practitioners easier. And that way it's not
Yeah,
necessarily.
yeah, and making so and it, but the motivation isn't so much making the cyber folks' jobs easier. It's, you know, it's it's not only protecting whatever organization they work for, but you can extrapolate that out. It's like, the stone in the brook, that, those rings
You're right.
move out, right? It's, our 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 countries are safer, the world is safer,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
It's more secure. if we all have just some of those really basic cyber skills.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. This has been such an interesting conversation, Randall. Again, like I said, we could go on and on and on because
Yeah,
there's pretty much so many things to talk about. But I do appreciate you taking the time
likewise.
to come join us today. So just hold on a call. So for everyone who wants to connect with Randall, his details are going to be included in the description box following this video. If you have any questions for Randall, where would you like them to reach out to you on?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Okay, perfect. So if you have any questions for Randall, feel free to reach out to him on LinkedIn. But other than that, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks.
Just hold it.